Okay, I see. We're live now. Okay. All right, welcome into our Overreaction Monday edition of Locked On Bills, brought to you by Cover One. This episode, of course, brought to you by XBet. It's XBet, which we'll get in a little bit more into by the end of the show, as we have quite a lot to get into over the next 20 minutes or so, because obviously it's Overreaction Monday. And in fact, people just, I think, really jumped the gun, Eric, and they went Overreaction 4:30 and decided to hit to Twitter at like 3:45 and really just smear the internet with all sorts of just plain and simple overreactions to a loss that, listen, I tried to prepare folks. This was a tough game. It wasn't just because of the opponent. Obviously, the injuries are eventually we're going to hurt this team, because what did we say early on, Eric? This was a team that couldn't afford to lose a lot of guys. If they, especially the brand of football they've been playing, there's a very small margin of error. And if this team gets a lot of injuries, it's just not a sustainable brand of football.
Yeah, I mean, we want complementary football, and we want our offense to be efficient. Obviously, we're getting the defense playing. They're playing at an elite level right now. And, Tyrod Taylor and this offense took a lot of heat over the last 24 hours.
Deservedly so, of course.
Oh, yeah, of course. No doubt about it. And, of course, injuries played into that. And we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes, and how, losing Clay, and how the first half, the second half was almost like Dr. Jekyll and Miss Hyde, because honestly, we did pretty well in the first half, Nate.
The first half of play, I think maybe there was how many drives? Not many drives in the first half. I think there was only 4 for each team, 3 or 4. There was a lot of ball possession. And the one thing that I'll say about the Bills is they were putting together some drives. The 3 and outs weren't the issue in the first half. It was the second half, really right off the bat. And Tyrod even set it off, in post game, that drive really it kind of messed with their heads a little bit, because they had prepared to come out and be successful. I mean, that's what you do when you come out in the second half. You make some adjustments based on the first half. What didn't, and you try to build off that. And coming out 3 and out right away really hurt this team. And I think the emotional thing, but that wasn't the only thing. It was sort of the compounded emotional reaction of losing their best pass catcher, who's been arguably their offensive MVP in Charles Clay over the first quarter of the season. Now we know it's at least going to be a long-term injury, potentially. Maybe the end of the season they get Clay back, maybe like a Sammy Watkins situation of last year. But I think there was maybe the compound. You compound that injury, and that's sort of I'm sorry, ring action here.
No, you're right. You're right, though. I mean, losing Clay was huge. Obviously, he's our number one target. But I think what he brings, not just in the run game, because obviously he's pretty important in that regard. He brings that vertical threat, and in the first half with Clay in the game, the defense had to play a little more, too high sets on the defensive front. So that obviously helped us run the ball a little better. I mean, Shady finished the first half with 10 carries for 51 yards. We had 66 rushing yards in the first half, which obviously helped our offense, because our offense, again, we wanted to be efficient. We wanted to be ball control, because we don't really have the weapons, the elite weapons to, be explosive. And I think Cincinnati came out with a game plan to get ahead early and force our offense to be that way. But, honestly, the offense took the challenge, and they measured up. And end of the first half, Tyrod came out and dropped a dime to Brandon Tate in the back of the end zone, in a situation where honestly the play call probably wasn't the prettiest play call. They're running vertical concept down the seam to Tate from the 12-yard line.
I have to think that was something they saw like on film. Maybe
Sure.
They were seeing it, because it ended up being really, that zone was wide open. So they must have seen like maybe an over pursuit every time that look came out on the, inside the red zone or something like that. Because you're right, it's a very, very sketchy play call inside that. That's just a dangerous play call, and typically not a play that Tyrod would even try to throw.
No, I mean, and I call it a dime, because the trajectory of the ball had to be perfect. The ball speed, he had to put touch on that over, because they looked, for me, I mean, obviously all 22 is just coming out probably as we speak, but you saw a few of the end zone angles where it looked like cover 3 or cover 3 match. So he had to get it up over that defender, but in a hole between the safety and that slot defender. So it was a pretty ball. Yeah, it was pretty.
So tiny.
It was perfect. And honestly, a great catch and control by Tate, a guy that actually he played pretty well versus the Bengals last year too, right?
I thought so. Yep. Yeah, well, that's his old team too. It's one of those things. And listen, he's not a bad fourth or fifth option, and obviously he brings the return element. I thought that return really set that offense up in great position. But it is an issue of playmakers right now, and who is left on this team to make plays. I mean, your top two targets, your best wide receiver, and far and away your best pass catcher, and maybe most dynamic player outside of LeSean McCoy, now injured. You face an uphill climb, and I think the overreactions immediately they want to point fingers at Tyrod Taylor for the offensive struggles. And listen, this is a guy through 5 games is literally on pace for the exact same season he had last year and the year before. This is a 3,200 yard, 17 to 20 touchdowns and 6 to 8 interception player. It's just what he is. Yeah. And the idea that this guy can be successful with the weapons that he's surrounded with at this point is just a big ask of this player. And for people to act surprised or to, lash out and say he should be benched because of it is simply not an evaluation of everything at once. My criticisms of Tyrod Taylor, sure. They've been consistent, just like most people that evaluate him. It's been the consistent thing. So it's known what is the problem, and it's not like they're still the number one rushing offense in the league. If they were the number one rushing offense, and this is what you were getting 16 points in a game, I'd have some serious questions about whether or not Tyrod should be playing. However, they're getting nothing from the running game.
Right. And, I also want to chime in by saying, I think if we straighten the run game out, honestly, I think this team will be even more balanced because, again, we got the defense. We got a quarterback that is, more of a game manager than an explosive, quarterback. So I think they just need to augment the run game a little more because, in the second half versus Cincinnati, Shady was shut down. He had 12 yards in the second half. We finished with 82 rushing yards when we had 66 in the first half. I mean, that's if we were able to run the ball a little bit better in the second half, I think that would have put us in more manageable situations because I charted the second half and the third down specifically. And there was only one third down that we had third and short. It was a 3rd and 3, and that's where Taylor hit O'Leary for 9 yards. We had a 3rd and 7 in the fourth quarter that we were bailed out of by Carl Lawson's unnecessary roughness call. Every other third down in that second half was a 3rd and 8 or longer. And we all know that we cannot succeed on offense with that formula. We have to stay on schedule, stay on track, or else we won't be successful. And it has to start with the run game because we need more production there. I mean, we should be getting more production with Tyrod and LeSean McCoy in the backfield.
And the thing too, I guess that's, obviously there's a lot of frustrating factors, but you look at the run game and immediately people are saying, okay, they need to go back. They need to scrap. It's the system. It's the zone blocking scheme that these offensive linemen clearly can't execute. And then again, you look at personnel and you say, well, this team, this organization, this philosophy came in. Now, I understand you have to, take into account that injuries are going to happen, but they're without their best offensive lineman at left tackle. Sure. And a big part of this zone blocking scheme is a lot about fundamentally sound. That's why I think Richie's having a great season. Richie's having a Pro Bowl season because he can fit in any system. No doubt. You look at a guy like John Miller, he cannot. He's not playing well in this system. And I think he's sort of drawn the short stick, unfortunately, Miller, but because I just don't think Dukas is a very good player. I think he's being put in because of his size, which is a little puzzling to me. Yeah. But I don't know. There's just more issues than benching Tyrod Taylor. That's not the route a 3-2 football team goes. It's not even in the minds of this coaching staff. So the fact that it is so loud everywhere else is I don't know. It's weird to me. It's just we know what we're dealing with, So
yeah, with Tyrod definitely. And Nate, I also want to kill another narrative today because it's really honestly irked me since the game ended yesterday. And that's the fact that everyone is trying to run with this narrative that Rick Dennison is not adjusting to his personnel. I mean, that is
absolutely just nonsense.
Absolutely nonsense. And I went back right before we went live. I went back and charted every single run that we had yesterday. And out of the 24 times we ran it, we ran 4 outside zone calls. 4. Everything else was a power gap counter tray run. Yep. So the fact that he's not, the narrative that he's not adjusting to the scheme or personnel, that's hogwash, man. I just want to kill that now. But this also plays on top of, then why did they start Dukas? Because Miller is a power guard.
Yeah.
He's a gap guard. That's the only thing I didn't understand.
And what I'll say too, like on top of that point, is they've completely scrapped the 3-step game. There's really no remnants left of it in this offense. If you remember week 2 of the preseason, we're like, wow, this team's running a lot of 3-step. Are they running the West Coast right now? And all of a sudden, it's gone. Week 5. Week 4, they didn't have one 3-step drop back. Like, this is an offense that's now built around the strengths of their quarterback and their running back. And people are saying, well, why isn't he adjusting? Well, he is. And listen, Tyrod, right now, they're doing what they can with Tyrod, knowing that the same problems still occur, that he is struggling still to pull the trigger at times. But
yeah,
it's just you said it well, though. And I'm glad that because that narrative is junk. It's garbage. It's lazy. It's a very lazy narrative.
Yeah, I mean, it just turned on the film. I mean, I honestly, I think it was late in the second quarters when we first ran the outside zone, first outside zone of the whole game. I mean, he was running counter trays. He was running center pulls. That is not a Dennison staple, guys. So when you hear these, media people say it and ask these questions at pressers of, is the offensive line struggling? Yeah, they are struggling, but they're mainly struggling in the pass pro, because if we don't have a play action game, we can't help them in the pass pro department. And when we are forced into 3rd and longs, well, guess what? They're not going to really bite.
Right.
Yeah, they're not going to really bite on that play action, regardless if you get them out of the pocket or not. And that's what Cincinnati did. They put us in 3rd and long, stopped the run, and they're a top defense. I mean, 3 of the games and defenses we played against, we're top defenses. Our top defenses right now. So I don't understand why. Number one, everyone's so surprised that we struggled on offense. All right, because going into the game, everyone's saying, "Oh, this is a trap game. This is a trap game. Look at their defense; they're so good. You don't underestimate them." And then we struggle, and now it's like, oh my God, we got to bench Tyrod Taylor. Oh my God, we got to change the scheme. The coaches are bad. We need to fire offensive line coach. Stop it. Honestly, it's irritating.
And it just gets to a point where, and then somebody tweeted at me today saying that, when are you going to part ways with Charles Clay? He's never healthy. And it's like, what do you mean he's never healthy? He's been playing through injuries almost since a chronic knee issue, and has missed, and I haven't gone back to look, but he has missed only a handful of games in his time here in Buffalo. He's been an extremely reliable player, considering the fact that he comes into every season knowing they have to sit him a practice every week during training camp because of the knee issues that he still has. But he's still available every game. And the only other game that he missed was due to the birth of his child. So it's just, it's an easy way. There's players in this NFL, they're just easy scapegoats. And it sucks because Taylor, again, that it seems that now, like, people are coming at me as like I'm defending Taylor and saying he's a good quarterback. And listen, he is a very average, decent quarterback. He is. That's the way it is. And unfortunately, you don't have the team to win with that quarterback. You just don't.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have really the weapons either. But, I mean, the things that he does well, it does mesh really well with this scheme. And, the rollout game, the play action, and the run game. Typically, the run game, this outside zone run game is typically really good. It's struggling right now, yes. But again, Dennison is adjusting. And the one critique I do have about him when it comes to the run game is, and we've said it, for a couple of weeks now, is zone read. Where is it? Where are those design QB runs, one, or just the look of a design run? Because that's something Anthony Lynn did last year, is he would have him in the pistol or in the shotgun and make it look like it's a zone read when actually it was just an inside zone or whatnot, or just the normal run concept, because they didn't want to get him on the perimeter, get him hurt. But that's something Dennison didn't incorporate this year, and I'm kind of upset that he didn't, because honestly, I thought he could do some special things, especially out of the pistol formation.
Yeah, I do think, too, that this offense, I think, too, is struggling because they don't have another dynamic threat other than, LeSean McCoy coming from the backfield. Listen, for what Tolbert does for this team, he fills a role. I think, an important role because you do need a goal line back. Shady's not that guy. And on 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, he has proven he falls forward. He's a nice asset to have. I don't like him as your number 2 option at running back. It's never been a lack for trying. Listen, imagine if we would have had an opportunity to evaluate Tyrod Taylor with Percy Harvin, Robert Woods, and Sammy Watkins all at the field with Charles Clay and LeSean McCoy. Imagine if you would have had all of those weapons to fully evaluate Tyrod Taylor. That would have been super ideal. Then you would have known that literally this is his ceiling. He can physically go no higher because he has a great offensive line and a great running game. No. What we have now is a very difficult situation in terms of evaluating a quarterback because of you have to take into context. You can't just look at film and only watch a quarterback and then watch the broadcast and see a guy that was open and say, well, he missed that, because it's just everybody wants to be an armchair GM. But the thing is during the course of a game, you don't know where his cues are. You don't know who the play is intended to go to. They may be calling a play specifically to try to beat a look. And it might have not anything to do with the wide receiver that's coming from the backside of a play action fake. Sometimes it's just the way it goes. Yeah,
and it's tough, especially when, these hot takes on Mondays are without the all-22. And let's face it, none of us know really what the reads or progressions are on any given play, even with the all-22. So let's throw that out there. And you're right. Honestly, we want to be really tough on Tyrod Taylor and, with the all-22 included. But what it comes down to is, he's making plays the way he can, and they're trying to, build this offense around the way he can. And when you lose Charles Clay, I mean, and you're not running the ball, those two things together, it hurt us in the second half. I mean, we were 1 for 8 on 3rd downs because we were in 3rd and long too much. And, you talked about briefly about the injuries, especially Cordy Glenn. And I'm hearing, stuff on Twitter that we should, he may be on a trade block, or should we put him at right tackle? Almost the same conversations we're having with Cyrus Kouandjio last year, Nate. And it's just one of those things. When he's healthy, I think he'll be back at left tackle. I think we underappreciate how good Cordy Glenn is, compared to the rest of the league, not just in our system, but compared to the rest of the league.
That's what I don't think people realize right now, just league-wide, how much. It's only because it's being glorified by guys like Kareem Hunt or, before his injury, Delvin Cook. You look around the league, no one is running the ball successfully right now. There is a serious problem league-wide with good linemen. It's sort of like the baby boomers of the world. All of the good offensive linemen, the greats, are all sort of getting older. There hasn't been that new wave of really good. Listen, there's always a draft class where you look at and there's 6 offensive linemen in the first draft, or the first round of the draft. They're all studs. That hasn't come of late. And you see all these number 1 overall picks at left tackle, Luke Jokel, and these Eric Fishers, and all of a sudden, like, they're out of the league, and Luke Jokel's playing left guard now. And you look around the league, it has become very difficult because the opposite has happened defensively, where there's a premium now on the best athlete on the team isn't playing linebacker anymore because they know the money comes when sacking the quarterback. So now you're bet that DeMarcus Lawrence right now, oh my God, like, that guy is a freak. He doesn't have the body of a football player, but he is a freak athlete, and that's where you make the money, rushing the passer. So it just goes into sort of, this is the NFL now, and adjustments need to be made accordingly. And the Bills are just one of those teams right now that are struggling to piece together a 5-piece line due to injuries.
Yeah, and your points on the offensive line play from the college to NFL level, those are all valid. And I think that's part of the why, like, your team, the Browns, went out and spent the money, and teams like the Rams went out and spent money on free agent linemen to bolster their offensive line rather than, take a high draft pick and hope to develop him. Because, again, the NFL and college game are becoming further apart and at a lot of positions, not just quarterback, but at offensive line play too, because the more they water down the system for quarterbacks, the more they water down technique for offensive linemen. And that's probably a podcast for another day, honestly, because an interesting one, because that's something that is definitely happening and happening and should be taken a look at by most fans. So let me get to the chat box. So who's our sponsor this week, Nate?
Okay, so we definitely got to tell you about XBet, because it's actually a very interesting. We've talked about some betting sites on here before. This one's got a great mobile website. You kind of just log in and you can bet any game right there from your phone. Like tonight, if you want to bet on the game tonight, it's 3.5 underdogs, I think, for the home team. So that's Chicago and Minnesota tonight. So if you wanted to bet on that, you can go right up on xbet.ag and play right away. All you can do is create an account and log right in. And, they're offering live in-game wagering too. So if you want to right in the middle of a game, it's kind of great. So just head to it's xbet.ag today. Make sure you use the promo code too, though. The promo code is going to be xbet, all caps, and you'll get up to 100% bonus on your first deposit, which is probably the best part about it. So if you want to go and get your money back immediately and go bet it, have at it. So just go to xbet.ag now.
So Nate, there's something in the chat box I want to address, and it's from our boy Mike Stock. It's it's still about the offensive line play, and it's another narrative. I don't know where it was started, but let's put Ryan Groy at guard. Where did that come from, Nate? Do you agree with that? And if so, if he's such a good guard, why hasn't he been playing?
Ryan Groy's interesting. They decided that he was a player that they needed to bring back in a depth role. I really liked him when he was filling in for Eric Wood. I thought they had very comparable advanced stats at the offensive line position. I thought that and they really had a pretty similar sample size of games back to back. He's a nice sized player. He's got what you'd call like ham hocks. He's got those big legs. But guard, I don't know. As an evaluator, he seems like a guy that is in my opinion, better at center. And however, I do think that at some point he needs to get a look. Especially if you're looking at Dukas, Dukas is just not the answer. So what do you do? Do you give Groy a look? Eventually, I think it is interesting to me though that they haven't at least tried to move him around, because the talk was that he can play any interior position.
Yeah, I think that if a guy like Miller and Dukas are playing at guard, and I don't know, I'm not at practice every day. We're not at practice every day. I think that if Groy was good at guard, which he does have some traits, he would be there. And I think when, the common argument, as you mentioned, is that, we paid him a good amount of money to keep him. And I think the reason they did that was because of Eric Wood's history, his age. And honestly, I've been disappointed with Eric Wood. I thought that this scheme, the outside zone scheme, zone blocking all together, would help him and help him excel in the run game. Now, he's always struggled versus those, beefy D tackles, those shade nose tackles. And that hasn't changed. And I watched the last 2 games of him during the week. I just haven't been able to create the content, but he's disappointed me. So from top to bottom, I do think that, he has struggled this year. And honestly, if they hadn't extended him, which kind of threw a loop in Groy probably playing anytime at center, I honestly thought that going to Groy at center would have been a move later on, especially considering the contract and that. He's only on a 1 year, right?
Groy signed a 2-year, I believe.
2 year, okay.
And it's very reasonable. That's why I thought that was the transition. I thought that was them passing the torch, because of the price tag that you'd be paying your starting center in his second year was like almost I think it was $1.5 million. Like, it's something really reasonable. And then you bring back a guy in Eric Wood. Listen, I don't think anyone's going to sit here and argue the worth of Eric Wood in terms of what he is as a leader. But I think his play since, I don't know, really the end of 2015 has just steadily, but that again, you look across the league, it's just a common theme. Nick Mangold was how many drafts before Eric Wood? Not many, 1 or 2. He's out of the league. Yeah. So you have to realize, like, these guys take a beating, the offensive lines in the NFL, especially now. I'm just getting rolled up on all the time, knees, legs. This stuff's difficult to continually come back from. That's why a guy like J.J. Watt's in trouble. But I don't know. That's it. It is these big guys, when they sustain those types of injuries, that you lose a step very quickly. And those guys, when they lose a step, it's very, very noticeable. Just, ask Elam Manning.
Yeah, and my thing with Groy, again, I think it's very similar to Miller. Do I like him as a power guard or pulling guard? Yeah, I do. But I do think he still struggles with some of those inside moves that we see Miller struggling. I think he's very similar to Miller. And I worry that by moving him around, you're only going to hurt his development. And if we want him to replace Eric Wood, in the future, if they're trying to build for the future, like they say they are, then you keep Groy where he is and run with what you have. Honestly, again, I think that Dukas move was bull. They should have kept Miller in there, especially if they're going to run
all the powers,
all the powers they did. And
the one thing about Miller is he can move.
Yeah, and he did really well.
Yeah, he can pull.
Yeah, last year versus Atkins, there was a couple struggles, but as far as double teaming and I just remember a few plays where he just torqued Geno Atkins. I mean, he just torqued him, and when he was healthy last year, he played really well in the power scheme. So I'm in the power game, and even on some inside zone play, which we ran a lot last year. So I was kind of baffled by that move for Dukas, especially prior to the bye. Prior to the bye, though, like you made the switch on Wednesday, your first day of practice. You're going to put Vlad Dukas in there to start against the Bengals. One of the top defenses in the league. If you're going to do that, why not wait till after the bye?
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me. The timing, okay, Miller struggled, he has, but wait till after the bye. Then give him, it didn't make sense to me.
I'll say this too. The interesting thing about this front five is, they're not playing. They're not the worst unit in the league, and a lot of people will be like, "Wow, this offensive line's taking a giant step back." And I think people also have to realize too that when you change offenses 3 times in 3 years and you change philosophies 3 times in 3 years, that, you know what I'm saying? This isn't, and again, you have to talk about the roster turnover. These are all new players trying to gel together. The fact that they started off 3-1, I think was more shocking than them losing on Sunday. And I think that people needed to keep that in perspective about this season, is that the 3-1 start was the surprise. It wasn't them losing to the Bengals. And once you can kind of get that in perspective, this game becomes a little bit clearer, and you just it is telling. All you have to do is go to Pro Football Reference and go ahead and look up Tyrod Taylor, because the 2 seasons he started, last 2015, 2016, very similar seasons in 14 and 15 games. He actually had a better season in 14 games in 2015. He had a pretty efficient season that year.
He did.
And you talk about the next year, he takes, I don't want to say step back, statistically speaking, no, he did. And then this year, he's literally on pace for the exact same numbers. And for people to just be, well, this isn't going to work. And the idea that like Nate Peterman is just, people know that he's better. It's, how do you know that he's better? Okay, I understand if there's this clamoring to go to a rookie. Yeah. But this isn't a guy that you spent a first-round pick for. He's not stepping on the door. He's not on the doorstep or on Tyrod's heels. He's a guy they drafted as a long-term development option, maybe a guy that could fill in for you if your guy goes down. That's the MO on him, is he was pro-ready to step in and play 1 or 2 games. Do you know what's funny? Wouldn't it be funny? Wouldn't it be a really good career of Nate Peterman if his ceiling was Tyrod Taylor?
Oh, that's a good point. I mean,
are people expecting him to be better than Tyrod Taylor?
I honestly, most of the time, okay, Tom Brady is an outlier. Those guys that are drafted later are outliers, all right? Tyrod Taylor, late draft pick. Nathan Peterman was drafted in the round he was for a reason, guys. And, I mean, we love Nate Peterman and what he brings as a quarterback. He does everything right, all the intangibles, the mechanics, the throw on the run. He's a system fit. It was a good draft pick, all right, a guy to develop. But let's not act like he is ready to play, especially over Tyrod Taylor this season with this defense. On our defense is good. So have a guy like Tyrod who is he's gonna hold the ball a little bit, but he's also gonna create some explosive plays when you don't have weapons. And I talked about this with you, through a text message, that I was surprised we didn't do more 5 wides in the second half versus the Bengals, because towards the end of that first half, we went to 5 wide. He hit Shady a couple of times. He extended a couple plays. It forced the defense to spread out. ID'd the coverage better for him. So I was kind of surprised that they didn't play 5 wides a little more. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where he's going to struggle, though. I mean, he's going to struggle. He's going to hold a little bit. But, start using things, those scramble drills, those 4 and 5 wide scramble drills to help Tyrod move the ball and force that defense to show their hand.
And it's funny because I don't think that the people calling for Nathan Peterman really know what they're asking for. Like, they don't really know what they're calling for, because what they're calling for is them to completely scrap most of what they've been doing now in the 5 and 7 step drop to go to what works for Nathan Peterman, which is a 3-step quick, get the ball out fast. If he's not there on your first read, you're probably just going to check it down on your second read as your second read. So that what you're asking for is a really simple version of the offense we're getting. You won't see the type of can Nate Peterman even get out of some of the terrible situations that Tyrod's been inside the pocket? I don't think so. So, like, what you're asking for, you have no clue the ramifications of putting a fifth-round pick who, first of all, doesn't have the escapability that Tyrod has, as I was just mentioning, doesn't have that escapability to get out of an offensive line that maybe two other quarterbacks can play behind successfully in this league. And it's not Tom Brady. And it's like Cam Newton, or name another running back that can run for his life out of the pocket, because that's what you're dealing with right now. And that has to be, you have to have that in the back of your mind and know what you're asking for when you're saying, let's put a fifth-round pick in. You're on. I think you're on. You mute.
All right, sorry about that.
You're on.
So the thing with Peterman, again, I like Peterman, but I think with him, it's limited in a different way, than Tyrod. Tyrod can make most of the throws. Okay, Peterman just can't. He's always throwing from the near hash into the boundary. I mean, that's something Matt Canada did with him, when he was at Pitt, and you just can't scheme a game that way. You can't win a game that way.
Not in the NFL, because of where the hashes are too. It's not like the
exactly
where you have those wide hashes and you can disguise your quarterback's lack of arm strength over the course of the field. That's what it's designed for in college, is you can mask some of those. When you go to the pros, everything gets tougher. You've got those narrow hash marks. And I'll tell you what, throwing from the right hash to the right sideline is not that much different than throwing, you know what I'm saying? Like from the left hash to the left sideline. It's just, people have to use that stuff and keep all of that stuff in mind when you're talking about a guy who physically just he can't throw the whole route tree. So you're talking about so Bills fans, you guys want to watch slants and dump offs and maybe a timing route every once in a while, and maybe he can beat the top off with a corner route, but he's not throwing any posts 55, 60 yards down the middle of the field beating a cover three. He's not doing that. So if you want that, or if you want a more exciting offense, that's what doesn't make sense to me about these people calling for Nate Peterman. You want a more exciting offense, and you're asking for the guy to sit on the bench that can run a 4.5 and can get out of what he's been having to get out of. It's baffling to me.
Yeah, and I have some stats up from the preseason and Peterman and the way the offense was designed for him in that preseason, and it compared it to Tyrod Taylor's numbers last season, and 25% of his throws were to the wide side of the field. That's just so low. You can't have that. Again, it limits your offensive play caller. It limits all of your weapons or lack thereof. And again, you talked about the offensive line, how we need consistency, how we need to at least get a 5-guy set. So that we can build some consistency. Well, when you don't have that, and you're going to throw a fifth round rookie in there, it just screams. It screams like you want to tank, honestly. And because Tyrod right now, let's settle it. He gives you your best shot to win.
No question.
Best shot to win, hands down. Are there some things that he's got to work on? Yeah, but for the most part, Nate, as we said, he is who he is. Let's just maximize what he does well. And I believe Dennison, again, outside of the zone read runs, I think Dennison and this staff has done a really good job of helping and maximizing Tyrod Taylor. They just got to get that run game going, Nate.
Yeah, for the last word, I definitely agree with both of those points. And the running game is maybe the most important thing to begin to get back on the right track. And we knew coming in, even with Clay and with Matthews, that this was going to be a work in progress, something that we had to be patient with. I said it in the fourth preseason game. Tyrod Taylor needs 10 games before we can even start to criticize him for his shortcomings. It's you have to wait. We just got to the halfway point of that, and people are already calling for his job. So that's what I'm saying. You need to have patience with this offense and realize that 3-1 wasn't in the plans for the fan base. So what happens when they win is they weren't. So now they've captivated the hearts of fans everywhere, and then they equally crush them the next day. It's just, you just need to be more even keeled about it. I know that's asking a lot for a Bills fan, but it is what it is. But we just need to, as a collective fan base, understand that, if you're driving a, Toyota Camry and you're going up against a guy who's an Andy Dalton who's got AJ Green, and you're driving a Ferrari, it's a little bit different of a race. Okay, you're not really racing the same race. So those are just things that people have to sort of keep in mind. All right, well, we have to remember that this episode brought to you by, of course, xbet.ag. head over to xbet.ag and put some money on tonight's game and hopefully get a winner. xbet.ag. So for Erik Turner, Nate Geary, this has been, of course, another episode of Locked On Bills, brought to you by Cover One.